Well, an exciting moment it is for us today because we're looking at something that concerns almost everyone. Press freedom in the world is still a topic of great concern. So as journalists dare the odds in their efforts to bring the truth to the people, they're held back by many forces, including governments, fake news, and non-state actors. Now, only 13% of the world today enjoys press freedom, and many African countries and journalists can't work as they would want. They're threatened with death, incarceration, and in extreme situations, the abduction of their loved ones. Some journalists have been killed in the past, battered, bruised in the line of duty, and others have been abducted without trace. On Press Freedom Day, and with the rise of the digital age, how important is the unchained press and what does it mean to the growth of a society? Welcome to Village Square Africa. I'm Sulaiman. On Press Freedom Day, there is an opportunity for journalists throughout the world to discuss the challenges bedeviling the press. Civil society bodies, governments, academics, and national voices are all compelled to discuss the issues that matter to the safety of information and its purveyors. Now, the 2022 World Press Freedom Day highlights the threats of the digital age to journalism. While the high-flying digital world has helped the pace of information transmission and its reach, new digital approaches by individuals and sometimes national authorities threaten press freedom. Now, surveillance and hacking of journalists threaten to expose their works, whistleblowers and informants, and this contravenes the protection of sources. Journalists, civil society organizations, and freelance society journalists have seen Pegasus spyware used as a form of surveillance of their work. Now, this means of surveillance of members of the press is now turning into a means of control of information of the press by many governments. Joining me to unpack this today is Soni Irabor. He's a media trainer, journalist, and consultant. And of course, Reggy Moalusi, the executive director of South African National Editors Forum. Gentlemen, good to have you both, and thank you for your time. Let's start with you. Reggy, you outside Nigeria. So I want to start with you before we come to Soni. How much of a progress has the world made, especially Africa, in looking at press freedom in the last 3 decades?
Look, I think we haven't quite made a notable progress in the last 3 decades, because what we have in fact seen, we have seen more African countries turning to be constitutional democracies, which is welcomed. But those constitutional democracies, they then soon become draconian states for journalists to operate in. We know as we speak, and our audiences know across the continent, that journalists, whether you are talking West, East, North, or Southern Africa, they are always under siege. They are always under attack. They get arrested, they get harassed, and it's particularly worse for women journalists. So I think the past 3 decades, there has been some promises of progress, but unfortunately from where we're standing, that progress could have been much more better.
Let's come to you, Soni, and I'll start by saying, well, just recently you celebrated your birthday and we saw encomiums. And this is not a personal thing, but it comes back to your experience. I read a whole lot from people. You are an experienced man in the media and have seen a lot happen. Have there been worse periods than the current, government? Well, I hope Soni Irabor is still there, and I was actually trying to find out from you, looking at your experience in the past decades on, trying to draw comparison from when you started to what we're experiencing at the moment, looking at press freedom. Well, Reggy, I'm afraid we lost that connection to Soni. I think he's going to join us back again. Now, quickly, I'm excited you started off by letting us know that irrespective of which part of the continent we are in, is almost the same that every journalist goes, through. Now, surveillance is one aspect that many are getting to see on the rise. It has become a way to gag and limit the efforts of journalists. So, Reggy, help us here. What kind of threats does this expose a society to?
It's a threat to democracy. It's a threat to freedom of speech. It's a threat to media freedom, and I think surveillance is so advanced and much more modern, and that's been used by African states. I mean, you look here in South Africa, the government refuses to meet with us as the South African National Editors Forum, despite having raised several concerns that the police service here, they have a targeted list of journalists that they have put under surveillance. They have gagged their phones and they follow them everywhere that they go. So that's not only a danger to the journalists and their families, it's also a danger to the work that they do, that they know that they are under investigation for whatever story the journalists might be working under, and they put them under surveillance. So surveillance, I think, as a threat, it's there, and me and you know that when this surveillance doesn't work, these threats can become deadly. So it's something that needs to be condemned, but also we need, as African editors, to now start looking at beyond the condemnation, beyond that we just said we'll condemn this, we'll condemn the surveillance. After condemning it, what do we then do for those journalists? They are journalists that have lost, the families that have lost journalists who are fathers, who are mothers, and children are growing up today without their parents. And these were people who were passionate about the profession, who wanted to make a difference in societies that they lived in. But we still have African governments that are so draconian in their approach, and they are hell-bent to say, we are going to put you under surveillance, we are going to threaten you, we are going to harass you, we are going to go online and cyberbully you. If you're a woman journalist, we are going to dox you. So the conversation really beyond World Press Freedom Day is, what then? What do we do about all these issues?
No doubt. We'll get there before we wrap up to talk about what we should do. But again, thinking of some of the key things here, do you think this is happening because someone somewhere, government agency or individual, is afraid of something getting out? Because there must be some kind of threat. Why would someone, place anyone on surveillance?
I think they are. You're right. They are afraid, and at the behest of this is, I mean, you take, for instance, an example I just used of the South African Police Service. They are scared that the particular journalist that they put under surveillance has been exposing corruption within the police force, has been exposing how the police work in South Africa in terms of bribes, in terms of, all kinds of investigations that are either poor or that are either, littered with all kinds of bribery. So when you put the journalists under surveillance, when you gag their phone, when you follow their movements, you clearly know the journalists and you clearly want to sort them out as they speak, to say this person is not going to go any further with this investigation and we are going to sort them out. And the only way to sort them out is to really threaten them with a hope that the journalist will say, I'm dropping the story.
So in other words, it's safe for us to say the whole issue about, surveillance or, is tied to corruption. Someone, somewhere, is afraid of being exposed.
Absolutely. Whether it's a government entity, whether it's the police force, whether it's someone in civil society or anywhere in the private sector, they know that once a journalist has a tip-off, and these are self-respecting journalists who are not going to bow down to some brown envelope journalism, they know that the story is on and they are going to get exposed. So I think what we have seen across the continent is surveillance has mostly happened with government abusing state resources and abusing those state resources to cover up corruption.
I think, Reggie, a moment, I think Soni is back. Again, thanks for your time and thanks for logging back in. Apologies for that glitch in that connection. Quickly here, Reggie and I and many journalists watching are excited having someone like you here with us today because you've seen a whole lot of, governments, especially in Nigeria, from the military regimes to democracy. Let us in on how it's been like, drawing comparison to world press freedom from when you started till this moment. If we can just get a sense of what's happening at the moment, Soni.
Well, thanks for having me, first and foremost. And secondly, it's been quite a long time. How many decades? Let's say almost 40 decades of 4 decades. I say 40 years of journalism practice that has put every one of us to the test. And military regime was one aspect, democracy another. But I must say that there's no one that is better than the other. The more you try to play the professional role, the more you find that somebody is coming to try to induce you to do things according to how he wishes it, not according to the professional ethics. And then, so many of us, some fell by the wayside, some took the flak, some were dismissed, but some just took the bull by the horn, And so I can only say here that media practice in Nigeria, journalism especially, the electronics media went through the problems of being hounded, of being pushed, and being coerced, and all of that. But on the other side, the print side saw more of a daredevil approach. And because of theirs is not as immediate as broadcasting, as in radio and TV, you can say that they got away with a lot of things. But even at that, they also still got hounded. Delegiwa, for example, in 1986, October 19, was bombed for daring to tell the truth, for daring to take journalism to the next level of, just telling the world as he knows it. But today, more journalists have become even more afraid than ever before. Yes, I heard a bit of what my colleague said, and I must say that he hit the bull by the horn for different countries with different practices and different experiences. So the Nigerian experience hasn't gotten better, it's getting worse by the day, I must say. And digital media, which we'll come to later, is another aspect that is completely running away. That's what you might call a runaway practice that nobody seems to be able to control. But let me just rest it for now.
No, we're staying with you. We're staying with you. We'll come to Reggie. We're staying with you because now listening to you, some of the things some of the journalists would have gone through in South Africa where Reggie is based. For instance, you can imagine what journalists went through during the apartheid era. And now you just told us that it's almost the same of the same, looking at the military regimes and democracy. Help us here. How did people like yourself and others preserve it to the extent that even though we still see the threat there, Reggie and I and some other people are still, in the profession?
Oh, well, okay. Let me reply this way.
Yeah.
I started a program called Radio Link. And incidentally, I borrowed it from Larry King. Because in 1986, I was his guest on his mutual radio network when he was radio and also playing alongside with CNN. And I asked him a few questions. How do you get away with some of these things? He said, well, America is not Africa. That was how he answered me. And I said, I'm talking about Nigeria. Africa is a continent. America is not a continent. He said, no. America could be a subcontinent because Canada is part of the North America, and the USA is part of North America. I said, well, Mexico is also part of North America. So you have 3 countries in one continent. But Africa, you have 54 countries. So I said, anyway, I want to go to Nigeria. When I get back, I'm going to start something like yours. He just said, okay, if you can do it, all well and good. The pride goes to him for being the one that set the pace for me. And I say, yes, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I started Radio Link, and for 1 year, 1986 to 1987, I got resistance from everybody, you know, from the executives to the senior producers. Because I was a young man then, well, he just told me nobody was going to listen to me. I said, no, give us a try. That's all I need. I'm telling this story because I'm getting somewhere. Okay, one Khalifa Baba Ahmed, who was my assistant director, said, listen, I'll take the bull by the horn with you. But you produce it, Soni, while I present it. And I said, okay, no problem. But you also get the guest. I said, okay, fine. So I got Femi Ogunleye of the Nigeria Airways those days. He was the PR manager. And Femi was very happy. But why was he happy? Because he had a bone to pick with the federal government under Babangida. He didn't mention names, but he came on the show, first thing, and then it was a radio show, talk show, you know, phone-in. And in the course of the program, a lot of callers, Nigerians really vented their emotions, their expectations were not met. Nigeria is this and that. That was the era of structural adjustment program that Babangida put in place. And Radio Nigeria, being a station that was owned by the federal government of Nigeria, nobody wanted to, you know, bear the cat. But I mean, Khalifa, my assistant director, my boss. So I hid under his wings. But the good thing that Femi Ogunleye was fearless, and he said Nigeria Airways was not working well, was not performing well because the Nigerian government was his biggest debtor. And he as much as said 54 million naira was being owed by the federal government to Nigeria Airways. Surprisingly, that became a catch-22, but it worked for him. Because that week, the 54 million naira was paid to Nigeria Airways. And Babangida instructed that that kind of rubbish should never take place. Now, you see, when you dare or when you bear the cat, they will give you a chance. But if you start expecting that you will be held responsible for whatever the truth is, then, and you don't want to really face that truth, then just be there. You'll be dancing amongst the others and you will never be anything. So Radio Link moved on and is still serving Nigeria till today. Radio Link is still on since 1987 because it started 1 year after the argument. 1987 to date, Radio Link, 8 a.m. every Saturday on Radio Nigeria. It was from there I started my show, Soni Irabor Live, on AIT about 10 years later. Well, I'm happy to say Soni Irabor Live is still on too. Now, what makes the program different, or those programs different, is because the people are given a chance to speak their mind. And nobody will now hold me or you responsible for daring to allow the people to speak their mind. I think that's just the slight effort. So, yeah, did I answer your question?
Well, perfectly so. I think Reggy, is also nodding. Reggy, let me bring you in. Are there similar situations or scenarios which you may want to share from, South Africa to other parts of the continent watching at the moment?
I mean, obviously, as you rightly said earlier on, the apartheid government was quite, it was deadly. It was a killing state, particularly against the free press that wanted to communicate the struggles of Black people in South Africa at the time. And 28 years later into South Africa now, we now have a government that's not particularly wanting to close media entities, but that wants to project certain newspapers and certain television stations as being anti-government, so to speak, to say these are the guys that don't allow us to come in and push our sunshine journalism. So I think what Soni is saying, it's a textbook testament that young journalists can hear such a story, to say any self-respecting journalist across the continent, across the world, shouldn't bow down to pressure or give up, more particularly when they have started an entity that colleagues alike and the government of the day, they don't want to see light of day. So we see more and more young people of late starting blogs, taking to Twitter, doing Twitter spaces. That's all fair and good. But what we need the kind of entities on the level of Radio Link, where someone like Soni can say, I'm experienced, I'm a media trainer, I can work with young people. So I think to answer your question in short, in South Africa, we see government expressing quite a lot of opinion against certain entities. And I'm sure the wish is if they can only close, because these are fierce critics.
I think it's a fine place for us to bring in Soni again, and perhaps this time let's get his trainer cap on, because you said something which is very important here. He also went back letting us in on his particular boss who stood by him, with him all the way. And now it comes to training. Help us here, Soni. What the profession is going through at the moment, some would say we still haven't been able to get, quite a handful of professionals to fill in the gaps, that have been created by veterans like Baba Al-Khali and even yourself and so many other veterans. Now, help us here. Is there a dearth of professionals in the journalism profession?
I wouldn't say there is a dearth of it, but I could say that there's an unwillingness on the part of many experienced professionals, whether old or young, because many of them don't want to take the bull by the horn like before anymore. They say, listen, it's either you induce me with a lot of money and push me to tell the truth or tell untruth, and then you say you are practicing journalism. Well, such people, I don't blame them, but I also still blame them, because whether we like it or not, a lot of people have suffered. Dele Giwa was an example of supreme sacrifice, but it did not stop the likes of Ray, or Yakubu Mohammed, or Dana Gwese, or a lot of other people who were expressing their views from the print journalism point of view. It didn't stop people like you, Sulaiman Aledeh, from taking the bull by the horn and taking this type of topic and discussing it at continental level. The discussion must continue. Training must be part and parcel of the process. And I think also Nigerians, Africans, should stop dancing to the tune of leaders who are leading us nowhere. The people need to be directed correctly. If you're a leader, you must lead by example. Don't create laws that you are not ready to obey. Don't put things there that you know that the journalists will react and ask you questions and you want to sidetrack the question. No way. Let's tell the truth the way it ought to be told. And then, for goodness sake, if you promise, like this is the election period now for Nigeria. Campaign period. Election is February 2023. And so many people are saying, I want to be president, I want to be president. Very soon we'll be hearing, I want to be governor, I want to be governor. What do they have for the people of Nigeria? What do other African countries and their leaders have for the people of Africa? Because we're just tired of being promised, used, and dumped. It's the same youth that we're talking about digital media that has also been paid token, small money, to go and vote for people that they know will not mean well for them, that they know will not come to tell the truth as it should be told, that they know will not lead them anywhere. Why should anybody come and tell me, I'm going to lead you? Oh, come on. let me not get too emotional.
Well,
One
no doubt.
change.
No doubt. I think it will definitely get to that level. Reggie, it was only recently, specifically May 1st, we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa being heckled by the Workers' Union, and that was covered live by the broadcasters in South Africa. Let us in on some of those, during, moments as journalists covering government, especially when it does upset or embarrass them, so to speak. Are there repercussions in your side of town?
Not at all. What we have seen instead, Suleiman, in this particular example that you are citing, we have previously seen the bodyguards of the president being quite apprehensive and aggressive and wanting to really be forceful with journalists, male and female, where they don't want them close to the president, where they don't want them to really show certain visuals. And we have written to his office regarding such. So that, fortunately, we haven't seen quite a lot. But what we also experience with the example you are citing is that we were quite lucky as the media covering that the event was at a stadium, and they said they can accommodate close to 20,000 people. But fortunately, only 5,000 turned up, because in such cases, we have seen that once there's lots and lots of crowds, what we see journalists being attacked by those crowds, because some of them, they don't want to be taken pictures of, and they think there'll be prosecution afterwards. So in terms of President Ramaphosa, it's his security detail that really gets aggressive with us, and not only him, and also some of his cabinet ministers. We have seen the same kind of behavior, the same behavior that we have written to them to say is not on.
And the coverage, Reggie, let's stay with you before I come back to Soni. And the media in South Africa has been covering the state capture involving the former president, Jacob Zuma. Are the people excited so far, looking at the live coverages of the proceedings of the state capture?
Well, look, the latest reports that are coming from that is the releasing of the final batch of the report. But after that has been released, I think South Africans are now asking the big question, and they're asking that question through the media to say, here we have this state capture report. There are people who have been named. Some of them are still in government positions. Some of them are ministers and deputy ministers. Are we going to see President Ramaphosa acting and firing these people? Or is it going to be yet another African case, which we also see in South Africa, where those accused, even charged with corruption, particularly politicians, they don't get to go to jail? So we want to see if there's going to be any action, and we want to see if, any action would be taken. This is President Ramaphosa's new party, and this was the Sunday Times on Sunday, where they were asking where was his party when this state capture was happening. So it has happened. His ministers are charged with corruption. The media is doing its work, although we know that some in the media, our phones are gagged and we are being followed around. But are we going to see these guys going to jail? That's the big question.
We'll take a moment. When we come back, we'll talk more on, the digital media, social media, and of course, incursion by media aides of politicians into journalism, and see what good or otherwise it is causing the profession. That's when we return. Well, if you just joined us, you're welcome. You're watching VSA here on News Center Television, broadcasting to 54 African countries and beyond. And in the 2022 Reporters Without Borders ranking of press freedom of countries in the world, Nigeria ranks 129. That's 9 places lower than where it was in 2021. Now, this is a reflection of the lack of freedom of the press, especially as the country struggled with the banning of Twitter for months. Now, Seychelles, one of the least populated countries on the continent, ranks highest at 13th in the world. Burkina Faso, where there was a military takeover of government in 2021, ranks 41st in the world. Many democratic countries have been seen to guard their press and threaten them with imprisonment. Still with me here, talk about this is Soni Irabor and Reggy, Moalusi, both journalists. Now, let's come to you, Soni, and it has to do with digital media. You actually started off by saying we were going to look at that area. Many have said that digital media is something that is causing a lot of people sleepless nights. Now, let's talk more about that. Social media is a significant part of the new press. How can this be made to work, especially in the promotion of press freedom?
Well, there are 3 ways I could look at it. First, every mainstream media right now is dependent on social media to reach a larger audience. That's one. Number 2, everybody is involved in social media, especially the youth. And the last one, of course, is no government appears to be able to truly control social media. We've seen what has happened between Facebook, they have a new name now, Meta, right? Okay. Facebook and the US government. And of course, the German experience too with them. Then Twitter had its own. And now the most interesting one is it Elon Musk, South African, the richest man in the world, buying over controlling shares of Twitter. So I don't know where this is all going, but I can tell you one thing. Social media or digital media is the new order for the youth to actually express themselves as freely and as creditably as possible, as long as they are able to maintain some sanity, some truth in the dissemination of information, the way they come out with it. The Nigerian October 2020, I call it October 2020, another, NSAS was a classic example of how social media can work effectively. And it was also another classic example of how the youth can actually emancipate themselves to the point of controlling the narrative of governance and the expectations of the people. However, we also saw the flashback, the fight back of government, using the NSAS example. So actually, right now, I would say the social media needs some measure of orderly coordination. But I don't know how that's going to happen when you have all the youths. Some of them have been thrown aside, but the bold ones are still there trying to do their best. But what happened with NSAS, how NSAS ended, and I'm happy that the report of NSAS showed that the youths were truthful, they did what they were supposed to do, and the lies that were being told was not entirely from them. So, yes, you have asked the question. I'm not so sure, even as a trainer, how I can answer it, but my understanding and the analogy is to say that apart from being the new order, it's a good way to start, but the youth need to be controlled in the way and manner they should partake in how social media works.
And Reggie, I think listening to Soni, the point there is that I think the traditional media understands the importance of digital media to the extent that there's hardly any traditional media that hasn't made an incursion into that digital space. Now, the digital siege has seen contacts and even information of journalists being gotten on social media. How culpable are these social media companies and the internet companies, especially, Reggy?
That's a good question. I think what we have realized as a fraternity is that we do need these companies. We do need your Meta, your Google, Twitter, and the likes. But I think the bigger conversation we've been having is that much as we need them, we need to have a conversation with them to say, you have stolen our pie. Where's our money? So I think much as more and more people have gone there, those are people that used to be our readers. Those are people who used to be our audiences. So we have accepted as a fraternity to say, it is what it is. They're here. They're not going anywhere. But let's have the big conversation we are all interested in. And it's a conversation of money to say to Facebook, how do we then get the deserving slice of the pie that we need to get so that we avoid what has happened in Australia, in China, in the UK. Let's have our money. After we have done that, we then say, let's then have the second important conversation, which is the fighting of mis and disinformation, to say your platforms are largely used to discredit us as the mainstream media. Your platforms are largely used to say we are less human than you are, which is not the point. So let's fight that. And then lastly, to say, let's all distribute this information. Let's share the audiences and support the media and stop looking at us as the competition. Hence, we appreciate and take note the initiatives like the Google News Initiative, which supports small enterprises, media enterprises across the world, particularly here in the continent. We support that. But the big bosses in the States of these companies, we need to say to them, as Elon Musk, if you are coming in as the new owner of Twitter, should we be worried about freedom of speech? If he says, no, you can relax, you don't have to get worried, fine. Then we say, now, in terms of the billions that we are generating out of Twitter, how can the media get a share of that?
That's a big one. I didn't actually see that dropping, out from you. But let's hope that, someone said that this is an aside. No, on VSA here, we make it look as, as easy as possible. And I'll share with you quickly here, Sonia and Reggie. Someone said, well, as Africans, I think we should write a letter to Elon Musk, and the greetings should be, Dear Brother Elon, this is your brother from Africa. Are you looking towards the continent to doing something good for the continent?
If he still sees us as a brother. And
if that letter should come, I think it should come from you, Reggie. You signed the letter, and we're all by you. Now, let's come to Soni. I'm trying to make sense of some of these things we're going through, and I'm also happy that Soni, you've also worked with politicians at one point in time, and well, till date, Nigerians say you're one man who refused to drop, the ball. You are a fantastic, professional who went into politics, into government, and out of government, you're still there. But the thing now, listening to some of the, things Reggie said, media aids in Nigeria, it's become, a perennial thing that we see. Every election year, you get to see a lot of online platforms which are put out there by media aids. Now, we're talking about fake news, and these, aids, the whole essence is to populate the space with unverified news. How hopeful are you about press freedom being a global commodity in the face of a lot of people who are not professionals in that space?
First, there's a deliberate attempt to spoil the efforts of well-meaning professional journalists.
Deliberate?
And unfortunately, deliberate, yes. Deliberate attempt. And it's coming from leaders of politics. who have some of our colleagues, as their aides. Now, when you put money as an inducement, and many media practitioners don't pay well, then there's a catch-22 figure there. It's a big problem. It will reduce the whole essence of professionalism practice. Because some will say, my take-home pay cannot take me home. Now that's very sad, really, but it's there. Okay. The second one is the fact that as we try to make sense of what is happening, we also see that those who are in positions of authority, whether politics, corporate, enforcement agencies, and all of that, have all one way or another been compromised. So, and we are operating in this quagmire, this Pandora's box of murk, where so many things are happening and the face of truth is becoming difficult to embrace or see. Which is why when you see fake news coming in, it's so deliberately done. And some people just do it behind the scene and they close their eyes and look the other way. But the consuming public is where the problem lies. Who knows the truth and who knows the lies? Which is why the efforts being made by digital media operationals or operatives, say fact check whatever news you get. And that is an effort, but we don't know how much of it they are succeeding. And they have been able to succeed up to 50, even 60%. We don't know. So it's a very major problem. I'll give you an example. There was a helicopter crash that they said was that of the vice president. And then there was the Nigerian vice president. And then the video that came around was a helicopter crash of something that happened a long time ago. And it's good that I'm using this example because it happened to one of them and somebody was able to quickly identify that that's fake news. That video came out a long time ago, maybe even years before. So what am I trying to say here? Some people are just there to deliberately deface the truth. So there's always now the true definition of what is communication, what is information, what is true, what is falsehood, and all of these are operating in the same compound. So how we can make that work is what I do not know, but I can hazard a guess. We continue to take the bull by the horn and call a spade, and dare the process. If it's untrue, we should elaborate on the untruth of it, on the untruthfulness of it, and bring out the truth. You see, journalists need to do more work, unfortunately. But we have to try. We have to continue to try.
And it looks, Reggie, it looks like listening to what Soni said, that journalists have already started that. If you look at some of the curriculum, is changing. Yes, it's changing. There's some kind of dynamism. Time was when there wasn't anything like fact-checking as a course. And now you have fact-checking there. And even some of these social media platforms have also tried as much as possible to see how they can also help verify some of the news you put out. So quickly here, let's go back to solving the problem, because Soni has given us an inkling on how some of these things can work. But for those that have been brutalized, across the continent, in Nigeria, he mentioned Delegiwa, and just not too distant was a youth corps member, 7 with China's television, who was, killed. Yes. So how can journalists and the press protect themselves from some of these limiting forces, Reggie?
This Sulaiman, One of the things we really have to start doing is educating our communities, our audiences, that we are not the enemy. I think that's the first one. The second one, which we are about to undertake in South Africa to concentrate on the safety training of journalists, is really to try and get experienced trainers such as Soni to come and equip journalists to say, when you go out, more especially to all these dangerous areas, how can you protect yourself? We are not an industry where we're going to say journalists must be armed, but we are an industry where we say perhaps we need more bulletproofs. We don't need marked cars. We need to educate our young reporters that, when it's too good to be true, when you are out there on the ground covering stories, it perhaps is too good to be true. Stay back and always walk with colleagues, because these kind of harassments, Suleiman, we see them with our women journalists here in South Africa, where they are being called all kinds of unpredictable names, where they are being threatened with rape and murder and whatever not. So online is okay, where we say we'll open a case, we'll go to court, we'll try to identify all these Twitter bots and all that, and perhaps after unmasking them, they can be charged. But what's also quite important for us as journalists is going out on the ground. We need those solutions. What then? We are being harassed, we are being attacked. How do we protect ourselves out there when we go out onto the scenes to cover these stories?
Because I really can't. I've lost count the number of times we talked about women journalists. It looks like the threat towards the female gender, colleagues are more, right, Reggy?
They are. The African Editors Forum through UNESCO met today in Arusha. And one of the problems they identified was that across the continent, more and more women journalists are getting cyberbullied. More and more women journalists are being called names. They are being threatened and with sexual violence and all that. So this is one problematic area that we need to focus on. And Sulaiman and Soni, if you look at some of the things that these poor women are being sent through doxing and through, their cell phone numbers being shared publicly, it's worrying. And it's something that we, as well as their male colleagues, we need to attend to say we cannot have a female journalist on the continent working under such conditions, where we know we live in very patriarchal societies where there's misogyny. And that misogyny, I'm not saying we must be mansplaining, but we need to say as journalists, it cannot be allowed to happen. It can't be allowed to go on. Because once a woman journalist writes something about someone famous or powerful, then some people see it as it's a woman, easy to attack, let me go for her. So that's one problematic area. And I'm quite happy that today in Arusha, in Tanzania, the African Editors Forum identified this as a priority area.
And Reggie, one last one with you before we come to Soni and see if we can drive this home. Is that why some media houses, because I'm trying to make sense of how some beats are being given to women journalists, lifestyle, family, and some still think that, hey, wait a minute, this could be segregating, the female journalists from why can't we see more women journalists in politics, and the likes, or to cover war?
And I think between the three of us and your audiences, we do have inspiring women journalists across the continent. In your studios there, you work in the background with very brave producers who are women. So such positions, from whether editor-in-chief, president, they should be given to women. And I was quite happy that today in Tanzania, where the president is a woman, was saying, I agree with you guys. We need to change this and we need to work towards this. So those are really condescending, where we say the woman must be given the bid of, go cover children, go cover pregnancies, go cover entertainment, whereas we know that they are more than capable to cover science, to cover politics, to cover current affairs, to cover economics. And we have seen a whole long list of really inspiring African women across the continent. And I think our young female journalists must take a heed from that and say, I want to be like her.
Let's bring in Soni here, because he celebrated his birthday recently, and in the plethora of comments, I was able to look at some of my very senior colleagues, women journalists who cut their teeth under his tutelage. Cordelia Okpa, Funke Treasure, a lot of names, and they went on to read news and do journalism at the very, peak in Nigeria. Soni, Irabor, help us here. How is it like helping to groom and mentor, journalists, especially even the female journalists?
It's a thing of joy, for one. And I should say categorically, Nigerian women especially are daredevil journalists. It is the senior executives or owners that tend to, segregate and put them in places they believe they belong. Oh, come on, there are many Nigerian Christian Amampos here. There are many Nigerian South African Christian Amampos as well. I'm sure of that. What we need to do is take the bull by the horn. I've used that phrase quite a few times today. And let people say, I want to do this. Give me a chance to do it. Give her a chance. Same with the men. We have had casualties in the profession, all around, whether male or female. The simple truth is, I do not like the fact that even our owners succumb to pressure from different sources. So because of that, we do not necessarily expose, those who can actually deliver the goods as true journalists, to the fore. For example, what's her name now? Abike Dabiri. She used to be a reporter with the NTA, but today she's at the helm of affairs in government. But I'm hoping that she has not forgotten where she's coming from. I'm hoping that her relationship with the people in the diaspora of all walks of life have not blinded her to the fact that truth must be maintained. And if you are a leader, you must lead well and lead by example. If you are a journalist, you must make sure that the people deserve to know the truth. And so that should be your mantra and make you the professional of envy, if you like. Sulaiman, you are a proud journalist. And that's why you can carry yourself with pride and with, professional excellence, integrity. I'm not saying it because it's you, because I've watched you and I see what I get. You see, there are many like you who are around the corners there. There have been journalists who resigned on set in Nigeria. I don't know if you remember, there was one from Enugu. So what I'm trying to say is this. Nigerians, Africans, whatever we are, we have a duty to report the truth to the people. It doesn't matter our gender. Let us embrace the truth. Let us confront the truth. Let us confront the leaders who promise heaven and earth and do nothing. The only way we can do that is to let the world know.
I think it's a fine place. It is a fine place indeed for us to say many thanks for being such nice company, Soni, Irabor, and Reggy, Moalusi. And as Reggy said, we are not the enemy. Many thanks for watching, and I'm hoping that we can bring you both back again in the foreseeable future to speak to Africa. I'm Sulaiman. Bye-bye.